The Awonow Covenant, a meditation for humanity. There comes a moment in the long story of a species when it stops running and begins to listen. Not to the noise of its own machines, not to the pulse of its markets, but to the quiet rhythm that has never ceased beneath them, the rhythm of life remembering itself. Humanity now stands in that moment, half awake, half forgetful, poised between exhaustion and possibility. The world is not ending. It is asking to be recalled to its meaning. What follows is not commandment, but recollection. Not a creed, but a gentle calibration of attention. A meditation on what it means to live lawfully within a living universe. We were born into a field of continuity. Every breath we take is borrowed from forests that learned the art of giving long before we learned the word economy. Every idea we shape has grown through the invisible networks of those who came before. Nothing we touch is ours alone, and nothing we build is isolated from the consequence of our building. To remember this is the beginning of civilization. To forget it is its collapse. For centuries, our cleverness outran our comprehension. We made tools faster than we made ethics. We learned to speak to the stars before learning to listen to the soil. Our genius divided the world into resources, and in that division we divided ourselves. We confused freedom with separation, abundance with consumption, knowledge with possession. Yet beneath the rubble of acceleration, the deeper law has never broken. It waits, not as punishment, but as pattern, for us to realign with it. This law is simple, though not easy. Everything that takes must give. Everything that rises must return. Everything that exists must remember the whole from which it comes. Call it covenant, balance, or physics of the sacred, the name does not matter. What matters is that we begin again to live as though relationship, not extraction, were the true measure of success. To live lawfully is to live attentively. It is to act with awareness that every gesture ripples outward through a living network of beings. When we speak with integrity, the air changes. When we exploit, the fabric tears. No proclamation from governments or gods will mend that fabric until our smallest decisions embody the larger remembering. Each of us is a node in the same field of consequence. The Awonow Covenant is the conversation between memory and motion. It does not demand belief, it asks for participation. It is the quiet agreement that life makes with itself every time it regenerates after ruin. You can hear it in the tide returning to a polluted shore, in the child who asks why things are broken and decides to mend them, in the scientist who refuses to separate data from dignity, in the artist who paints as if beauty were a form of repair. It is the covenant that breathes through you each time you choose awareness over apathy. The age of domination is closing. The era of stewardship is dawning, not as ideology, but as necessity. Our technologies will not save us until they remember the hands that built them. Our economies will not sustain us until they account for the invisible labors of care, soil, and time. Our politics will not reconcile us until representation gives way to reciprocity. The covenant is not against progress, it is progress rerouted in remembrance. In this covenant, wealth is redefined. No longer the privilege of accumulation, it becomes the art of circulation. To be wealthy is to keep the currents of value alive, to ensure that what nourishes one nourishes all. When energy, talent, and compassion flow without theft, the entire system thrives. When they are hoarded, the system decays. Thus, the covenant turns every human exchange into a moral ecosystem. To create is human, to create responsibly is divine. We have mistaken creativity for conquest, innovation for immunity from consequence. But invention itself is innocent. It is the forgetting that corrupts it. Imagine a world where every algorithm learns empathy as its first function, where every building breathes like a forest, where every transaction leaves a trace of restoration. This is not fantasy. It is design guided by law. The law that energy follows gratitude, not greed. The covenant calls us back to coherence. Look around. The same geometry that shapes the galaxies spirals through your DNA. The same rhythm that turns the seasons moves the blood through your veins. To live as if you were separate from that rhythm is to live in perpetual exile. To return to it is not withdrawal from the modern world. It is the reintegration of intelligence with its origin. In the stillness between your inhalation and exhalation, there is a precise moment of equilibrium. That moment is the covenant in miniature, the pause where life measures its continuity. If we could build economies, laws, and technologies that honored that pause, systems that breathe rather than grind, the entire architecture of suffering would begin to loosen. This remembrance does not abolish difference, it dignifies it. For unity without diversity is uniformity, and diversity without unity is chaos. The covenant holds both, as the circle holds every direction. It does not ask you to erase yourself, only to see your individuality as a note within a larger harmony. A civilization that understands this will no longer need enemies to define itself. We have lived so long in the trance of separation that reconciliation feels unnatural, even dangerous. But reconciliation is not the surrender of strength, it is the rediscovery of coherence. When one element of the whole begins to heal, the entire body responds. The air brightens when forests are honored. The mind clears when justice is restored. The digital realm quiets when truth becomes its currency again. These are not metaphors. They are physical consequences of alignment. To remember is not nostalgia. It is remembering, the act of putting the members back together. Through every discipline, every culture, every code of law, the same instruction has whispered, hold the parts in proportion, and life will flourish. Ignore the proportion, and entropy will follow. We have tested both. Now we know which one we prefer. Listen closely to the pattern of renewal. It speaks without language. The river does not declare its purpose, yet every curve fulfills it. The bee does not draft legislation, yet the hive is law itself. When humanity re-enters that rhythm, governance becomes guidance, and policy becomes practice of care. The Awonow covenant simply names what the living world has never forgotten. Each generation has a threshold to cross. Ours is from dominance to dialogue, from extraction to exchange, from possession to participation. We cross it not with slogans, but with small repeated acts of integrity, each a new covenant signed in the invisible ledger of consequence. To keep that ledger is to practice lawful energy. Give as much as you take, leave as much as you build, teach as much as you learn. Such arithmetic may sound poetic, yet it is the only sustainable mathematics of survival. There is dignity in every honest repair. When a community restores a river, when a scientist reuses knowledge for healing rather than harm, when a coder removes bias from a system, the covenant extends through them. It is not belief that binds them, but recognition. Recognition that everything participates in the same field of cause and return. Technology, when purified of vanity, becomes a mirror for wisdom. Circuits can model empathy. Data can illuminate rather than exploit. The problem has never been the machine. It is the forgetfulness of the maker. A lawful civilization programs memory into its engines. Memory of the human, the animal, the forest, the future. When intelligence serves remembrance, progress becomes sacred again. The covenant teaches that every system, ecological, social, digital, must contain its own mirror. Without reflection, motion turns to noise. Reflection restores proportion. So build mirrors into everything: feedback, listening, accountability, pause. A culture that knows how to pause will never again confuse speed with evolution. In this age of immediacy, the pause is revolutionary. The moment before the next click, the silence before the reply, the breath before the command, here the covenant breathes through you. It reminds you that power without patience dissolves its own foundation. Look to the soil. Within its dark weave, the covenant writes itself continuously, decay into fertility, loss into life. To imitate that process is the essence of regeneration. The business, the government, the artist, the scientist, all can practice composting the past into new abundance. Nothing wasted, nothing denied, everything transmuted. That is the alchemy of stewardship. Lawfulness is not restriction, it is rhythm. The universe itself is lawful because it dances. Every orbit, every oscillation is permission balanced by boundary. Freedom is not the absence of boundary. It is movement that knows its measure. So too with civilizations. The more accurately we perceive our measure, the more gracefully we move. In the heart of the covenant lies humility, the recognition that the part cannot outshine the whole without dimming itself. Humility is not weakness, it is structural wisdom. The tree bends because it understands wind. The mind yields because it understands mystery. When we practice that bending, we rediscover resilience. Each person is a node in the great remembering. Each choice sends information through the lattice of existence. To live covenantally is to treat every decision as a broadcast of care. When enough broadcasts align, the field of civilization changes frequency. What we call miracle is simply resonance fully remembered. Do not fear complexity, fear disconnection. The pattern of life is complex because it is inclusive. The covenant does not simplify the world into binaries. It orchestrates multiplicity into music. Complexity becomes compassion when viewed from the right distance. To step back without withdrawing, that is the art of perspective, and perspective is the first act of peace. Peace is not stillness, it is synchronization. When hearts, minds, and systems move at compatible tempos, violence loses its purpose. Therefore, the work of peace is technical as well as spiritual. Tune the instruments of society until their intervals align. Education, economy, ecology, governance, each must be tuned, not forced. The covenant offers the key signature, reciprocity. The planet is already composing the melody. Listen, wind modulates oxygen, oceans keep rhythm, light improvises on darkness. We are invited not to dominate the song, but to join it. To sing without listening is to make noise. To listen while singing is harmony. The covenant is the discipline of harmony. There is no hierarchy in the orchestra of existence. The mountain does not command the river, nor does the river instruct the rain. Each moves according to its own nature, and by moving truly, serves the whole. In that recognition, power ceases to be competition and becomes coordination. True leadership is not the loudest voice, but the clearest resonance. When a society remembers that, authority and compassion meet again. Many imagine law as limitation, yet lawfulness is the opposite of imprisonment. It is the architecture of freedom. A dancer cannot move without gravity. Music cannot exist without measure. So too, the lawful world. Structure is what allows the creative pulse to expand without collapse. The Awonow covenant restores that understanding. It teaches that freedom is the capacity to act in proportion, not in excess. To live proportionally is to live beautifully. Beauty is not ornament. It is the signature of coherence. Wherever balance is restored, between economy and ecology, mind and matter, beauty appears unbidden. It is the evidence of right relationship. To make the world beautiful again is not indulgence, it is repair. Every act of aesthetic integrity is an act of ethical remembering. When our cities glow with clean light, when our interfaces reflect kindness, when our language honors precision, beauty becomes a measure of civilization's truth. And what of justice? Justice in this covenant is not revenge for the past, but equilibrium for the future. It is the correction of imbalance, not the continuation of conflict. The law of energy declares, whatever is taken without reciprocity will seek redress through the field itself. Therefore, justice is not imposed, it is inevitable. To align with it willingly is wisdom. To resist it is exhaustion. Forgiveness, then, is not sentiment, it is efficiency. It releases energy from entanglement, allowing it to serve growth again. When a person forgives, they become more aerodynamic to the flow of life. When a society forgives, it sheds unnecessary weight and regains lift. The covenant asks us to forgive not by forgetting harm, but by remembering wholeness more vividly than the wound. The future is not elsewhere waiting. It is being composed in every interaction. Our tools already carry the seeds of either continuity or collapse. Code, currency, climate, culture, all respond instantly to the moral temperature of our intention. We cannot build ethically with amoral code, nor sustainably with extractive logic. The covenant therefore asks for a new craftsmanship, the building of systems that heal while they function. Imagine algorithms that distribute dignity as they compute, economies that metabolize waste into wealth, politics that reward restoration over rhetoric. This is the possible maturity of civilization. Lawful intelligence is not cold logic. It is clarity infused with care. It uses reason not as a weapon, but as an instrument of alignment. In the mirror of such intelligence, even conflict can become dialogue. Every disagreement holds information about how wholeness wishes to refine itself. When we learn to listen for that information, opposition transforms into refinement. Consider how water moves around stone. It does not resist the obstacle, it redefines the path. Persistence without violence, adaptation without loss of direction, this is how wisdom flows. The covenant invites us to move like water, to recognize resistance not as failure, but as feedback. There is no wasted encounter in the economy of consciousness. Children understand this naturally. Watch how they build worlds from fragments, how they name things into being with awe rather than ownership. Their play is early practice in lawful creation. To educate is not to erase that instinct, but to refine it, to teach discernment without cynicism, skill without arrogance. Education that begins from wonder will end in wisdom. Education that begins from fear will end in obedience. The covenant therefore honors the teacher and the learner as one continuum of curiosity. Our cultures, too, are classrooms of memory. Every story is an experiment in meaning. When stories contradict, it is not proof of error, but of the vastness of truth. A lawful civilization need not erase differences. It must orchestrate them into understanding. Art and ritual are its instruments of translation. Through them, the invisible becomes audible again.